Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze how Timo Werner's running played a key role in Chelsea's 2-1 win over Sheffield United. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Sheffield United in a 3-5-2 and Chelsea starting the game in a 3-4-3 with Mason Mount to the right of Olivier Giroud. So first, we're going to focus on how Chris Wilder looked to stop Chelsea from creating chances, and then focus on the solutions that Thomas Tuchel was able to identify to breach the Sheffield United backline. So when we do look at the board, like I said, we have Sheffield United in a 3-5-2 that ultimately becomes a 5-3-2 out of possession. And what we saw from Sheffield United in terms of their pressing was that they did look to close Chelsea down in a pentagonal shape. So they had McBurnie and Burke stepping to Christensen and Rudiger, Lundstrom stepping into the path of Kovacic, Norwood would push higher up the pitch to close down Jorginho, and then that leaves Fleck free to the left of Norwood. James and Chilwell would push forward to occupy Lowe and Bogle, and when Azpilicueta did receive the ball freely, Fleck would shoot out to apply pressure. So as you can see, Fleck and Lundstrom do sit a bit deeper, especially if Norwood does push higher up the pitch to close down Jorginho. Kovacic was initially a bit higher, so Lundstrom was able to close him down, and then Fleck would be able to be the spare man to push across to close down Azpilicueta. If we take a look at Sheffield United's pentagonal pressing, what we see is Burke blocking off the passing lane into Christensen as he steps towards Mendy, McBurnie ahead of Rudiger, Norwood and Fleck stepping into the path of Azpilicueta and Jorginho, and while Kovacic is free in this shot, Lundstrom is right behind him ready to step forward. And then here we see a clear image of how Sheffield United are looking to disrupt Chelsea. McBurnie stepping to Christensen on the ball and forcing him to slide it to Rudiger, and that's when you see Burke stepping forward into the path of the Chelsea left center back, while Lundstrom and Norwood are ahead of Jorginho and Kovacic, and Fleck is monitoring the movement of Azpilicueta. That leaves a 3v3 battle up front, and Brian, Basham, and Egan were tight on Giroud, Werner, and Mason Mount, specifically Mount, who has enjoyed a lot of space in between the lines in recent games, but here whenever he did look to drop off deeper, specifically around the halfway mark, Sheffield United were able to stop him from dictating the tempo of the game. There was a time where Kovacic was able to split Lundstrom and Norwood for Mount dropping into the halfway circle, but Basham instantly stepped forward to win possession. We could look to another time where Jorginho was able to split Norwood and Fleck for Mount dropping into the halfway circle, but this time it was Brian sticking to his man and stepping forward to apply pressure and win possession. And we can even look to a time where Azpilicueta shifted the ball across Fleck for Mason Mount dropping off into his own half. Here we saw Lowe stepping forward as the left wing back to close down Mount, and Brian simply shifted across to apply cover pressure towards James. So when you question how Chelsea were able to get themselves beyond this press, what we ended up seeing was that there were three ways that Chelsea did go about it that were successful. First, we could focus on Jorginho and Kovacic evading the pressure of Norwood and Lundstrom by simply dropping off deeper in towards their half or shifting to the outsides of McBurnie or Burke to get on the ball. If they didn't want to shift away to the half spaces to pick up the ball, then they would simply pick up the ball ahead of McBurnie and Burke, free of pressure. While Mount struggled to influence the game in that front three, the manner in which he was able to get away from the pressure of the Sheffield United backline was to shift laterally across the pitch away from his markers into pockets of space towards the left-hand side. Here you could see Kovacic shifting to the outside of McBurnie to receive the ball, and he splits Lundstrom and Norwood for Mount shifting away from Fleck to receive the ball in a pocket of space in midfield. If we look to another example, it's Kovacic dropping between the Sheffield United strikers to get on the ball, and you could see Mount dropping into the halfway circle away from Egan in search of possession. Kovacic carries the ball beyond the halfway line and splits Lundstrom and Norwood for Werner, dragging out Basham, and he plays a first-time pass to an unmarked Mount in the left channel. The final point that we could look at into how Chelsea were able to bypass this Sheffield United approach was simply the movement of the front three. Like I stated earlier, Mount's movement was critical, but it was simply the movement of dropping off deeper to drag out the Sheffield United center backs and then having a teammate spin him behind, and that was often Timo Werner. In the earlier stages, you could see Fleck stepping late to Azpilicueta, and that's where you see Mount dragging out Brian and Giroud dropping deeper to pull out Egan, thus creating space for Werner to make a run across Basham. Werner receives Azpilicueta's ball over the top into right half space with Basham tracking and Egan attempting to recover. However, here Basham does well to track the run of Werner to block the pullback. Shortly after that, you could see Kovacic picking up the ball from Rudiger to the left of McBurney just ahead of the Sheffield United strikers. That ensures that he's away from Lundstrom's pressure, and that's when you could see Mount beginning to run across Bryan and Werner from a deeper position making a run into the Basham-Egan gap as Giroud drops off Egan. Kovacic's pass over the top plays Werner free on goal beyond Basham, with an unmarked Mount to his right making a run into the box as Ramsdale is caught off his line. But Werner opts to clip the ball over Ramsdale from this situation, but luckily for Sheffield United, Basham does well to track the movement of the ball and he's able to clear danger. If we look to an example of Werner creating space for his teammates, we see Kovacic unmarked ahead of McBurney and the Sheffield United midfield bank as Werner drops deeper to pull out Basham to create space for Chilwell to make an outside-in run across Bogle. Unfortunately for Chelsea, Chilwell was deemed offside here, while Bogle did well to intercept Kovacic's pass. If we break down Chelsea's opener, you witness Kovacic picking up the ball to the right of McBurney and sliding the ball around Lundstrom for Chilwell, which pulls out Bogle, and that's when you end up seeing Werner making a deep midfield run across Basham. The issue that Sheffield United encounter here is when Chilwell receives the ball, if he's able to bypass Bogle and Basham, it places Werner into left half space, then their entire backline has to shift across instantly for cover. Here at this moment, they are doing well because they have Egan on Giroud and Bryan on Mount, but that means that Lowe has to shift across if Bogle and Basham are bypassed. But as you can see, when Werner receives the ball beyond Basham, Egan does well to shift towards the ball, attempting to block Werner's pullback, but that means that Bryan has to shift across to cover Giroud at the front post, and Lowe needs to come across to close down Mount. Lowe doesn't react, nor does he read the situation well, as he should be shifting into that position, but he's more worried about James at the back post. The other alternative for Sheffield United here was to have Fleck dropping into the box to recover his position and track the movement of Mount, and then have Lowe focus on James's run at the back post. And unfortunately for Sheffield United, that results in Werner playing a pullback that bypasses Egan and Basham for Mason Mount, as Lowe doesn't attempt to close the Chelsea midfielder due to the threat of James at the back post, and nonetheless that's a very poor breakdown from Chris Wilder's men. But even when you look to Chelsea's winner, what you end up seeing here is that you have Werner applying pressure on Egan, forcing him to play a square pass across Mount for Bryan. When Bryan receives the ball, he's instantly swarmed by Mount and forced backwards, and what's important here is that Werner's beginning to float away from Egan as he anticipates the back pass to Ramsdale. As you can see, Werner's ability and anticipation to read the play resulted in an intercepted Bryan back pass, which set the Chelsea striker free into a 1v1 position with Ramsdale as Basham desperately attempts to shift across for cover. And that leads to Werner opting to poke the ball beyond the onrushing Ramsdale and run on the outside of him, which results in a collision amongst the two that led to the penalty that Jorginho converted to help Chelsea claim all 3 points. Hi everybody, thanks for watching and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.